Now, we have talked about quite a bit, right, about the rationale of government intervention and regulation. However, regulation is not the same as artificial force. When Confucius speaks of intervention, it is really about giving people a hand along the line of natural development. So, how about laissez-faire policy? Does Confucius allow for that? Well, yes, he does. But laissez-faire policy is not equivalent to 100% deregulation. So what does Confucius mean by that? Well, this answer is given by Confucius himself, of course. When Zizhang, one of his pupils, asked Confucius about the art of government, he talked about Confucius talked about the 5 excellent things. The first of them is bounteousness without any cost. And Zizhang said, so what does it mean by bounteousness without any cost? Confucius said, follow what is the profit of the people and profit them. So this means the economic policy should be driven by the want of people. Now, there is a fine line between following people's interest and having no oversight at all. It's not the same thing. Some of you may remember Dong Zhongshu, one of the well-known ministers of the early Han Dynasty. So he explained this by saying that if a sage governs a state, he must follow the nature of heaven and earth and the personal interest of the senses of men. Well, Dong Zhongshu is one of the greatest Confucians. So clearly the Confucians advocates laissez-faire policy. But I guess the question is, how do we know? How do we know what the people are interested in? Well, we only need to think about that from the perspective of basic human wants. The ancient Chinese recognized that economic want is the foundation of production. For example, the author of the Record of Grand History, the historian Sima Qian, he wrote an essay on commodities and trade in the history record, where he talked about the origin of production. So he seems to support this laissez-faire policy from the view of human want. Okay, so let's have a look. He said that all of our 5 senses, have want. The ears, like to hear pleasing sound, and there is a demand for the music production and sound equipment, right? The eyes like to see pleasing objects, and there's a demand for professional industrial design. The mouth like tasty food, so there is invention of artificial flavor and all kinds of food businesses. The body likes comfort, so there is demand for better duvet, cold resistant technology, and so on. The mind also demands a great deal of power and sense of ability. So there is demand for more convenient computer operating system, smartphone technology, exclusive clubs, let's say, and a membership. So everything out there is in demand, must fit into one of these or more of these categories. Now, sometimes we see people inventing useless things, right, just for the sake of invention. So there is no demand for it later on. Now, simply because the product doesn't satisfy any of the 5 senses. The demand by these senses of ours is very fundamental and very natural. So it's like the air we breathe. Therefore, in the essay, Sima Qian recommended that the best economic policy is to follow the economic activities of men. Now, Sima Qian went on to explain that the creation of different professions and industries is also a result of these senses, although a bit indirectly. For example, the profession of farming, right, comes from the demand for nourishment, and the profession of artisan comes from the demand for various tools. In modern terms, it can include all kinds of industrial products like cars, high-speed trains, mobile phones, and dog toys. They're all somehow related to the five senses. The profession of merchants is born because of geographical expansion of markets and the rising demand for exchange. And lastly, the profession of miners is related to the demand for natural resources, which itself related to all kinds of productions. But the truth is, nobody is planning any of this. Not politician, not religious teaching, or any kind of order. So when market is with limited barrier of trade, demand and supply interact with each other, and prices act as a signal of over and under production. So we can see that when such economic process can smoothly maintain its own course without interruption, all parties are satisfied with their need, and wealth is therefore sufficient. So in this regard, Sima Qian seems to advocate for laissez-faire policy.